It's not exactly breaking news that immigration is a hot topic. Some would even say a flashpoint for controversy literally the world over. But there's a group in Canada that not only embraces immigration, but has built a remarkable business model out of helping people emigrate to the Great White North by providing them with free resources. You are about to meet one of the masterminds behind the platform, moving2canada.com. Hi, I'm Park Howell, host of The Business of Story, and I'm delighted you're here to meet Hugo O'Doherty, Director of Partnerships at moving2canada.com. We explore how to share your story to build trust with those, as Hugo says, don't look exactly like you. And make no mistake, if you are placing your future in the hands of strangers halfway around the world, trust building is at the heart of every story you listen to and tell. You'll hear how moving2canada.com literally helps hundreds of thousands of immigrants start a new life. When I started working with Moving to Canada on their brand storytelling earlier this year, I realized that their business model can be clearly defined using the ABT, the and, but, therefore narrative framework. It goes something like this. As an immigrant, you are eager to start a new life in Canada. And if you are confident in the information you need to emigrate, then your move will be fast and easy. But you're overwhelmed because the amount of hoops you have to jump through and the waterfall of paperwork you must navigate makes you feel like a stranger in a strange land long before you've left your current country. Therefore, to expedite your immigration and peace of mind, your first move is to moving2canada.com, where you'll join hundreds of thousands of immigrants who have relied on this invaluable resource to quickly create a new, prosperous life in Canada. To demonstrate this ABT in action of their business model, I've created a GIF that you can check out in the show notes. It's based on the very simple conversational ABT that underscores the singular Moving to Canada's problem solution narrative for immigrants. And this simple ABT goes something like this. You're excited about starting a new life in Canada, but immigration is complicated. Therefore, make it faster and easier with moving2canada.com. I always like to start with a very simple ABT like that and then expand on it, as you heard in the earlier one. And as you will hear Hugo say a lot, their number one job is to build trust in the immigrant community by providing timely, accurate, and free resources to help them make their move as quick and easy as possible. The ABT framework is a great tool to help you develop trust with your audiences, and here's how that comes together. The ABT is based on the three forces of story of agreement, contradiction, and consequence that our primal, pattern-seeking, problem-solving, decision-making, buying limbic brain adores. Our brain's decision center loves receiving messages formatted on the ABT because it plays to its survival problem-solving mechanism. When you craft your messages on these three forces of story, you are automatically creating the three forces of trust building that include understanding, appreciation, and empathy. You demonstrate that you understand your audience by identifying them at the beginning of your and statement of agreement. You show them that you appreciate what they want relative to your offering and why it's important to them. Then, in the but statement of contradiction, you empathize with them about the trouble caused by the major problem that is standing in the way of them getting what they want. Now that you have effectively built trust through the three forces of understanding, appreciation, and empathy, you provide a call to action in your therefore statement of consequence. To illustrate all of this, let's review the moving2canada.com ABT one more time, and then think about how you could apply this same approach to your own brand. As an immigrant, you are eager to start a new life in Canada, and if you are confident in the information you need to emigrate, then your move will be fast and easy. But you're overwhelmed because the amount of hoops you have to jump through and the waterfall of paperwork you must navigate makes you feel like a stranger in a strange land long before you've left your current country. Therefore, to expedite your immigration and peace of mind, your first move is to moving2canada.com, where you'll join hundreds of thousands of immigrants who have relied on this invaluable resource to quickly create a new, prosperous life in Canada. But helping immigrants move to Canada by providing free resources that they can trust is only half of the equation. Hugo shares how they also connect vetted brands and their services to the newcomers to help them become permanent residents and build brand affinity along the way. Regardless, whether you're an immigrant or partner relying on moving2canada.com, it all starts with building trust by delivering on the promises they make through the stories they tell.
Yeah, we hear those stories all the time. When we do get them, people take the time to write to us. Look, we run surveys like maybe twice a year or something where I go out there and try to create those stories, or at least get the insights, take the temperature, whatever the case may be. And there's always like a comment box. Do you want to tell us anything? Most people leave it blank, but some people will fill it in going like, you guys are incredible. I don't know how I would have been able to get my resume in the Canadian format without you for free, or overcome this immigration challenge, or choose the right destination. You know, it's nice to when someone sort of validates all that and reminds you of the mission behind your work, which in our case is to empower people to create their dream life in Canada.
Hugo brings nearly a decade of industry experience to the Moving to Canada team. Originally from Ireland, Hugo first moved to Montreal in 2011, eventually becoming a citizen of Canada in 2022. After a great period helping Moving to Canada find its feet after launch, Hugo went on to work for one of Canada's largest immigration law firms for more than 3 years. He came back home to Moving to Canada in early 2018. He has observed Canada's ever-changing immigration system from both sides, as applicant and as a professional. As a result, he understands the needs and goals of newcomers and representatives alike. Hugo has also worked in the United States and Ghana. In his free time, he can be heard conjugating French verbs all wrong or explaining the offside rule to confused Canadians. So please welcome to the Business of Story, our friend from up north, Hugo O'Doherty. Hugo, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Park. Thank you.
Well, it's really nice having you here. I've had the distinct honor of working with you and Rory and the rest of the gang over there at moving2canada.com throughout this year, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you all, but really understand the major impact moving2canada.com has on immigrants and brand storytelling. You kind of on both sides of the aisle here, so appreciate you coming on the show and talking about how you guys do what you do. And let's begin with, Hugo, your backstory. How did you find yourself moving to Canada, immigrating to Canada, becoming a Canadian, and working for moving2canada.com?
Yeah, that's quite the journey. I'll try to tell the shortcut version. I first moved to Canada from Ireland, where I'm from. You might be able to tell.
Right.
When I was 24. Look, back then it was 2010-ish. They say that when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. And that was the case. Ireland's a very exposed economy. And look, there was a global financial crisis and we bore the brunt of that on my little island. So I made a decision. I was working in the equivalent of, I don't know what the local sort of cheap convenience store chain is down there, 7-Eleven. Something like
7-Eleven, Circle K, something like that. Yeah, the convenience store.
I was working in sort of the equivalent of that, but I had an education in my back pocket and a sense of adventure. So I was like, well, I'm not going to sit hanging around here, and I moved to Canada for a year. And then I actually couldn't stay. My initial work permit was valid for a year, and I moved to your fine country for a year, moved to New York City through a program that now I wouldn't be able to have benefited from because immigration laws have changed or been curtailed so much in the US since then. That was in 2012. But while I was down there, I kind of realized that Canada was where I wanted to pitch up for the medium term at least. So I moved back in 2013, and I've been here ever since. When I was here, I was just working as a bartender, mostly doing some freelance work. My background is journalism and more sort of feature writing rather than reporting. And I got some gigs, but I was bartending as well. I'll be straight with you. I had such a good time, and I was just winding down the days until they were going to kick me out. And then I got a call from a headhunter who'd noticed my work with Moving to Canada, which was sort of my main freelance client, so to speak. And I had an interview with a Canadian immigration lawyer who had built a 60, 70 person enterprise in downtown Montreal, focused on grabbing folks around the world who wanted to move to Canada. The name of that website is canadavisa.com. The late David Cohen, who was sort of eventually became not quite a father figure, but a bit of a mentor in terms of helping me get on the right path in my career. Unfortunately, he died in 2021. But I managed to get a job with him, and he was able to keep me in Canada. You know, it helps to be working for an immigration lawyer when you're trying to stay. So his team was able to help keep me here. And then, long story short, through the jigs and the reels, I became a permanent resident and then subsequently a Canadian citizen. And I came back to Moving to Canada, which had been a client of mine in my freelance days, on a full-time basis in 2017. So that's 7.5 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was the allure of Canada to get you out of Ireland and land there? Of all the places in the world you could have gone.
I actually wanted to move to the US, but I couldn't. I think
we have very, very high standards here.
Yeah. I think growing up, the allure of the United States, I mean, like Hollywood, music, pop culture is so... The US is such a source of that for the Anglosphere specifically, for English-speaking people around the world, but also people from other ethnic and linguistic backgrounds. And like a lot of people who moved to Canada were like, it's kind of close enough. But I'll be straight with you. Over the last decade and a half, I've been very happy to call Canada home compared to anywhere else in the world.
You're officially a Canadian now, right?
I am. I'm a dual Irish Canadian. It was funny. Yeah. I went to Ireland last week, and I entered Ireland on my Irish passport and then entered Canada on my Canadian passport. It was just, it's funny to wear both hats.
That's pretty cool. And whereabouts are you located in Canada?
I'm in Montreal. Downtown
Montreal.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about movingtocanada.com. You know, you sound like they were a client of yours initially, but then you started working full time for them. What is it that you all do there, and what is it that you bring to the website and the platform relative to storytelling, marketing, journalism that our listeners would find fascinating?
Yeah, look, a lot of other websites that cater to immigration hopefuls or recent arrivals would be lead gens for legal practices, right? They'll put out some blogs about, you know, what to know about this aspect of living in Toronto, or what to weigh up in terms of moving to Canada versus moving to the US, or any sort of blog style, even video content. But ultimately, they're trying to generate leads for a direct sale to that reader. We work slightly differently. We don't aim to sell directly, at least currently, to our readers. And we've got, in any given month, between 300,000 and 400,000 uniques. That's just on the
visiting the website.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then it was higher during the pandemic, but it's sort of gone back to that. The pandemic was wild. You can imagine the sense of confusion. But we work slightly differently in that we're just pumping out that content and those insights with no expectation or even desire to sell directly to that reader. We work with brands that want to also have access to that audience. So you can think of Moving Country. Where are you from, Park? Where did you grow up? Which part of the U.S.?
Well, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle. Right. And so I'm practically Canadian.
But you moved to Arizona, and when you did that, you probably needed to... There's a few transactions you made. You probably needed to find different insurers for various different aspects of your life. You probably needed to move a bunch of stuff, so you rented a truck. I don't know what you did. You know,
but a new bank, a dentist, a doctor, you name it. Yeah.
you can imagine that if you were moving across an international border, not just a state border, that would be even more onerous. Even though the distance might be equivalent, you're entering a whole different world in terms of the political and social culture. You're going to need to establish a lot of net new brand relationships. We give very highly vetted brands access to our audience, and our audience understands that we're not going to sell to them directly. We're going to pump out this great information. And from time to time, you're going to see an ad, or there's going to be a sponsored blog, or we're going to invite someone onto a webinar, or there's going to be some sort of opt-in when you complete a profile on Moving to Canada, where you can opt in to hear directly from brands X, Y, and Z. You could think across different lines of insurance, immigration services, recruiters, banks, real estate, even consumer packaged goods, supermarkets. They're all trying to establish these relationships with what is Canada's largest growing marketing segment. As it stands, around 23% of the Canadian population
Mm-hmm.
is an immigrant, and that's a landed immigrant, a permanent resident. That doesn't even count people here on temporary status, and that number is expected to go to about 30% by 2036. So it's a very fast growing marketing segment, and all of these people, not only do they need a bunch of services, they also kind of aren't really loyal to any incumbent. They're not getting advocacy back from parents about like, oh, I know the bank, like just talk to my guy. They need to sort of
Mm-hmm.
establish all these relationships, and that's where we win really. Is we're not trying to sell a three, $4, or $5,000 service, legal service to the people visiting our website, which is what we were trying to do at Canada Visa, which was where I worked previously. Very good work that those organizations do. That's not where we've decided to play. And we work with brands who want to natively insert their story into the story that we're telling our community around the world.
Yeah. Well, and if you really boil it down, and correct me if I don't have this right, you essentially are kind of an international gatekeeper. On one hand, you serve really two audiences. On one hand, you help immigrants make their move into Canada way easier and way faster by sharing them all the inside intel, the information on here's what you need to do. And if you're going to go here, you guys even have some really wonderful story videos on your website where you and your staff are showing immigrants different cities across Canada that they could potentially land in. And so the idea is you are helping them make that transition into Canada way easier than if they're trying to do it by themselves. And that's completely free. It's
Correct.
Absolutely free of charge. But now you've got this audience that's specific to these brands in Canada that like they want to get introduced to them. So you do the vetting of the brands. You don't let just anybody get involved. But now they have access to your visitors, your site readers, the folks that are relying on moving to Canada to make it easy to move in. And then you basically play matchmaker with brands, but of course it's up to your audience which brand they want to adopt or not.
Yeah,
and then I imagine your business model is the brands pay you to be able to have access to that audience.
That's it in a nutshell. I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, I mean, there's slightly different models and packages, and we run pilots, and typically they convert into longer term partnerships. So like, there's some is more of like direct buy, some is more affiliate. So that'd be on a cost per lead or cost per acquisition basis. Some are hybrid. So like there's various different ways we work with the brands themselves. But yes, in a nutshell, to the community member, they're blind to how exactly we work with the brand. They just know they're being marketed to, and they're really happy for that because they know that our trust factor with our audience is exceptionally high, and we take the temperature on that on a recurring basis because it's important to us.
Well, let's talk about that, Hugo. How do you keep that trust factor very high initially to get them in, and then how do you keep that trust?
There's various ways. I mean, we literally run surveys where like on a scale, among other questions, a 5-point scale, how trustworthy do you find moving to Canada? And it's always 4-point, very high stuff, 4.8, 4.9. That's the more sort of like taking the temperature. But on a more sort of day-to-day basis, like we run discussion boards and forums, and we always make sure that our moderation team is exceptionally highly trained, not just in the information that they give, but also the way they conduct themselves in terms of like adhering to group rules and setting those standards for other people. And people know when they come into like a moving to Canada space, whether that's like a discussion board or something, that it's not going to be a free for all, that there's going to be some guardrails set up. And then in the quality of the content itself, I don't know, like I used to work in the content side, and now I work more on business development. And between those stints, I worked in product, all within moving to Canada. The reason I'm saying that is it makes it easier for me and our operations manager to hire the right people to work on the content.
Mm-hmm.
We I we have a very high standard of what's expected and acceptable, and I think that downstream from that, there's a very clear through line to the trust factor we have among the community.
Yeah. You're kind of like the chief publisher there, because I know I've had a chance to work with your content staff, and they're very sharp. They're very, very good. And you all are bringing a lot of storytelling, even amping your approach to storytelling up there moving to Canada. What is one of your favorite stories that you have heard about the impact moving to Canada has had on an immigrant? There's got to be one story that really touches your heart.
you know, it was just a few days ago. I was checking in. It was just before I was about to fly home a week or two ago. And a client happened to be in town. They're setting up operations in the Montreal area, just outside it, in a place called Coteau du Lac. And they were saying that at their Calgary job site, they'd hired a bunch of our people. So we help organizations, employers, and recruiters build up teams in Canada. This particular company, Young Guns Container Crew, they're amazing. They were setting up operations in Calgary, and not only did they get a bunch of people in at rookie level, a lot of them got promoted quite quickly into leadership positions, and then those people took it upon themselves to create social events. You can think like pitch and putt, skating, beers on a Friday, that kind of thing. But that wasn't mandated or even like nudged. They just did it. And then now we're still hiring for their entry level rookie positions. And those people are quite naturally and not in a forced way getting not just mentorship, but this more holistic sort of landing environment. It's not just a job. You're also getting your access to like a social environment. When you're moving country as a young person, that's huge. You know, to get that in the workplace is massive. I got that when I was bartending. It's a very social position. And that warmed my heart. That we helped an organization expand its operations in North America. Amazing. They're actually from Australia, these guys. But that we were able to bring people into entry level positions in Canada. Those people showed the aptitude to become their best version and become a leader. And then they took it upon themselves to sort of create and nurture the culture at that job site. And both ourselves and the employer were just watching it. You know, we didn't have to do it. That really warmed my heart. That was just last week that they told me that.
You became a resource for them. And when you said our people, not your staff there at movingtocanada.com, but the people that have used your platform,
that's right,
to make that move easier into Canada. And now they've got a resource, a stable of potentials that they could bring in, interview. And it sounded like they had pretty good success with finding the quality of talent and the leadership they're looking for.
Well, they keep coming back for more. So I think that's when people want to open their wallets and say, how much more do you have? Can you find me more of these guys? And we deliver on that. So yeah, they're very happy.
Yep. I know when I was working with your staff there was a woman there, and I don't recall her first name, but she was saying, and I asked her, why did she start working with Moving to Canada? And she goes, well, I didn't even know about Moving to Canada, tried to make the move. It was, I don't know what she said, it took her 8 to 10 months. It was anguish, you know, just dead ends from right to left. And she finally figured it out. And then she got to Canada and learned about Moving to Canada, and said that had she used your free services, that she could have easily cut that time in half, maybe even by 2/3, and taken out a lot of the guesswork to get in, and was one of the reasons she was inspired to come to work for you all. I bet you guys hear that story a lot.
We do. I think you're referring to Rachel, who, for the audience's benefit, she's from the Philippines and came as an international student, and is a member of our team now. And if you go on our YouTube channel, you'll see her face. She's sort of the face of Moving to Canada. It used to be me, and I think it's better that it's not me. Yeah, we hear those stories all the time. And when we do get them, people take the time to write to us. Look, we run surveys like maybe twice a year or something where we I go out there and try to create those stories or at least get the insights, take the temperature, whatever the case may be. And there's always like a comment box. Do you want to tell us anything? Most people leave it blank, but some people will fill it in going like, you guys are incredible. I don't know how I would have been able to get my resume in the Canadian format without you for free, or overcome this immigration challenge, or choose the right destination. So when we hear those kinds of things, it does remind us we kind of get bogged down in the day to day. We've got our heads in spreadsheets like the rest of us, and it's nice to when someone sort of validates all that and reminds you of the mission behind your work, which in our case is to empower people to create their dream life in Canada.
Yeah. What are some of the storytelling initiatives you all are looking at now? Because, again, we worked together earlier this year, took your team through the different frameworks. We mapped out a potential plan for how to capture those stories and share them, widely with the world out there because they are so compelling. So what are some of your plans in place?
Yeah, we've got a few. It's always sort of, I think there's a bit of inertia among teams when they're encouraged to create new ways of doing things. But like storytelling has been around since the Stone Age. I mean, when I was in school, like we read Homer's Iliad. You know what I mean? Like that's I think 3,000 years old now, that story. So
well, you Irish are pretty good storytellers. There's just kind of innate in your country, I think.
That's all we got. I mean, I could barely set up the microphone before this podcast. I mean, I can't do anything with my hands. All I've got is my mouth. Yeah, but you encouraged us to use story prompt in particular to try to capture in a simple way that gives people a degree of comfort to share their story. We've gone out there and told members of our team's story back to the community. I suppose it's almost like you ever been to a bad karaoke where
everyone,
yeah,
every time.
There's always the MC of the night usually has to sing the first couple of songs and loosen other people up before they put their own hand up and say, actually, I want to do that. So we've gone out there and I've put my face and my voice out there to tell the story of why and how I moved here and some of the challenges that I faced in particular. And we're starting to get trickles of interest back of other people hopping on that. And I don't know what the content team's exact plan is but I'm sure they'll be curating that and amplifying it. We've got extensive social media followers, well over 500,000 across all the channels. And we've got an email database that we can blast these things off to. So I'm at something of a remove from the tactical element and maybe more involved in the strategic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to trust others with that process. Otherwise, I'll never sleep. So, yeah.
Have you guys considered doing a Moving to Canada podcast where you could share these stories, these success stories, also insights, the latest insights of Moving to Canada, and then even bring in your brand partners as sponsors to underwrite those shows?
I have considered that. We have considered that. It's always opportunity cost. I mean, it's always a case of what would we stop doing or not do in order to launch and maintain and grow this other thing. So it's on our radar. I would love to do it. I love being on the show with you right now. It's much more fun than being on another internal call or another client call. It's something different. I would love to be doing this weekly with different parties, whether they're members of our team, members of our community, members of the organizations that we serve. In a word, yes, but unfortunately, don't hold your breath for Q3 2024. But it could potentially be something we look at into next year.
Bandwidth is always an issue. There's no doubt about it. Are you guys do you kind of feel like you're still in startup mode with just the way things change so much and just getting the word out and so forth?
To some extent. I mean, to give you sort of a potted history, Moving to Canada was established in 2012, mostly as a function of the global financial crisis and the fact that there were so many people abroad who were trained and experienced and spoke at least one of Canada's national languages, mostly English, who could easily move to Canada and fill open positions here. And moving to Canada was established as sort of my business partner, Rory, refers to it as the mousetrap, to try and attract the attention of those people and then ultimately create candidate leads for recruiters. And in fact, he himself is a recruiter, and that was the initial plan. It then grew this other side sort of by accident, which is like it sort of became so successful absent that initial startup concept of being just a recruitment mechanism that we grew the team in order to serve that side rather than the recruitment side. And then the pandemic, we went from a team of 11 down to a team of 3 in one morning in March
Mm-hmm.
2020, because when the borders were closed and we had no real idea of when that might start again, our entire business model was, let's just say, in peril. Subsequently, we then have built it back up above and beyond what it was entering the pandemic. So to some extent, because of that upward growth and then pandemic and then upward growth again, we've since sort of plateaued in terms of headcount, and that was always the plan. We closed a couple of huge deals last year, and we were able to onboard a bunch of great talent from around the world. I think I'm right in saying that not a single one of us is a Canada-born Canadian.
Hmm.
Like, we're all immigrants on the team, and there's 15 of us, 14 or 15 of us. So to some extent, we are in startup mode, but we're sort of we've got out of that survival mindset of just getting through 2020 and 2021 and got ourselves in a great position, closing a couple of really nice deals, one with one of the major banks here, to be able to onboard great talent. A lot of us have never met each other, and we're about to meet each other for the first time in just a few weeks.
In person.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate
Yeah.
for it. Like, we're getting everyone to Montreal. I'm the only one in the city. We've got another team member who lives in the suburbs, but everyone else is scattered around the country. And I don't know if you've looked at the map lately, but it's a pretty big country. So we're spread far and wide. And yeah, I think that will be sort of a key moment when we look back in a couple of years in the history of companies. Like, okay, that's when we sort of really got to know each other and embed the great talent that we have, but sort of create the kind of I don't know what to say here, but like the kind of we've got a great culture, but because most of us have never met in person, I still think that we're just in the process of creating that thing rather than living it.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of business relationships and stuff, I think we're a little bit out of startup mode. We've got some amazing relationships with some incredible brands, in particular Scotiabank, which I think has operations south of the border as well to an extent. It definitely does in Latin America, but they're a great partner of ours. And we're finding that the campaign periods are growing longer, that it's becoming it's about continuing to work with great brands that we already have a relationship with rather than trying to just tell everyone that we exist. But
Mm-hmm.
some days I wake up and I'm like, no, I've got to tell everyone about moving to Canada all over again. So yeah,
Yeah.
because there's always people entering the market.
Well, it's a noisy world out there. One of the things that you do I find really interesting are the prompts or the emails that you can get, sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7 a week, about just updating people on what's happening with the legal side of immigration,
Mm-hmm.
depending on where you're moving to and so forth. And so you guys are always right on that leading edge of changes happening. How do you guys do that? Do you have a research team that is just always keeping an eye on that?
Uh, yeah, I mean, among the team members we have, we've got a lawyer from the UK who's also a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. But this was also my job 10 years ago. And there's sort of automated processes in place where we can just trawl all of the sources that we deem credible, whether they be government or non-government. And we just curate everything we deem relevant and package it back to the community really
Mm-hmm.
effectively and really quickly. They love it. Like, our open rates on our emails are on some of the automated email series that we have. They're well north of 50%. We get an incredible reaction to the content that we deliver. You referred to the emails, so I'm going to sort of ring fence it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we just got a bunch of alerts, but also a bunch of relationships. We can tap people, whether they're private sector or public sector, and and sort of get something off the record from them that we can then leverage in our content. So there's various ways and means of doing things. I suppose I'm sort of alluding there to my journalistic background, but I'm not as close to that process as I used to be. We've got a very capable team in house now who takes care of that, and I love watching them do their work, even though sometimes I'm tempted to jump in the sandbox with them. I now work on the client side rather than the community side. They pretty much always nail it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You are the trusted resource for that kind of information. Do you have any other competition that's doing the same thing you guys are?
Yes, there are some apps, etc., that are government funded that we compete with, and we usually compete successfully with. There are also websites out there that deliver information to recent or prospective newcomers, but they're mostly trying to generate leads for their own sales team. There's also, like, in terms of how brands spend their budget, we're always like, our competitors aren't necessarily those other websites, though to some extent they are. I see them more as collaborators, where we're trying to get brands out of the idea that the only show in town is Facebook and Google in terms of spending your money. So I'm there going like, hey, I know you've got a budget. We've sort of qualified all that. Are you going to go and give it all to Mark Zuckerberg, or like there's a startup of 15 immigrants who are trying something really cool? You want to try this? And usually we can sweet talk them into doing something, even if it's on a pilot basis, and more often than not that converts into something more long-standing. So our competitors aren't necessarily other mom and pop shops or startups. It's the big guys, it's big tech, because you've met digital marketers and ad buyers, I'm sure, tons in your life.
Oh, yeah.
The default now among not everyone, but a lot, would be, hey, I'll just try and get the best bang for my buck on buying space on Google. We're asking brands to do something a little bit more niche and interesting. I think more compelling.
And Hugo, have you ever read Bob Hoffman's book, Ad Scam, where he talks about like only 3 out of every $100 invested in digital marketing through the Zuckerbergs of the world are actually getting to your target audience? It's just a tremendous scam and so forth. And so if you haven't read it, highly recommend it. And I would hand it to every one of your brands and say, these are the dice you were rolling when you were advertising on Facebook and these other places. Or you can come in, I hate to say a captive audience, but a very warm audience of immigrants moving in, that they're coming to your website for one thing and one thing only. And that is to make my move, immigration into Canada, way easier with people that I trust and will get to know and care about. I would think that would be a premium ad buy for them because their market is so targeted.
Yeah, can I hire you as our brand ambassador?
You got it, buddy. You got it. Ad Scam. It's one of the best books out there. It's a very quick read. It's very funny, and it's very frightening from a marketing standpoint.
I'll definitely give it a look. Three out of 100, was that you said? $3 out of every 100?
Yeah, $3. And it's not Bob making up these numbers. He has done research all around the world with lots of regulatory bodies and other media research companies that said there's so much scam going on, scammers and middlemen and fake websites that are taking the advertiser's dollar, that when you put it all together, literally $3 out of every $100 spent is actually getting in front of your proper audience.
Yeah, it's not great. No. I guarantee any brand working with us that it's going to be somewhere north of 3 in 100. So yeah, a lot further north. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah, but something to consider. So what's next for moving to Canada?
Yeah, good question. I'm just off an internal call where we were asking ourselves a similar question. As I mentioned earlier, the genesis story of the organization is to generate leads for recruitment practice, principally in engineering and construction. We have an in-house recruitment company called Outpost Recruitment, and it does incredible work in nurturing and placing talent. Moving to Canada then became sort of a blog, right? So if you go back 10 years, like, you think of any website, sort of blog style, casual articles, maybe with some video content, etc. The direction we're leaning now is much more, I'd say, sassy. We're trying to create a personalized backend login experience. I say trying to. We have created it. We're trying to improve it. We've seen some green shoots specifically this summer on adoption and stickiness in that product, and we're now trying to weigh up the direction we can or should go. And if there's always opportunity costs. I mean, you mentioned, hey, you're going to spin up a podcast, Hugo. Look, I'd love to, but I wanted to make sure I don't want to throw something up that's half baked.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to personalize the experience so that, let's say, for example, we know certain things about you. You intend to move to Toronto. You're coming from Nigeria. You work in software engineering, and you're coming with a spouse and one child, right? That's a lot of rich data that people volunteer to tell us, that we could then package a backend experience for that person and help them fulfill on that dream to settle in Toronto, coming from that country, find the right sort of accommodation, but more meaningfully, like, ramp up their career. I mean, ultimately, for a lot of people moving country, that's the pull factor, is that they see potential better economic outcomes for themselves in one country versus another. And I'd love to, rather than putting up blogs on like what a Nigerian needs to know moving to Canada, I'd rather take all of the full person's identity and really package the content so that it can deliver on the conditions, the not the conditions, but the life circumstances that they have, which is inclusive not just of where they're from or where they're moving to, but also what they dream of doing, whether it's career or personal, and also what other stakeholders are involved, a partner, kids, etc. Decisions will need to be made either on behalf of those people or in collaboration with them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're going, is to become much more of a product than just a blog.
Yeah. And you have such tremendous opportunity to build community around those folks you help, where they are online sharing their story of how much easier moving to Canada.com made it for them in their immigration. And they're really, really compelling stories. And that's why I keep pushing, or I think about that podcast. It's such a no-brainer. It doesn't have to be perfectly produced.
Yeah.
You get out, you share those stories, you get some of your brands to underwrite it for you. It could be coming income stream for you all, but it also addresses both your audiences as people share that podcast around. For those immigrants that don't know about moving to Canada.com, it helps build that stable of customer coming through. And of course, then you are also rewarding your brands. But I know they're a lot of work.
Yep. Yeah. I always look forward to guesting on them, but I see the time and energy it could take the host and their team. And I'd love to do it. I'm confident that we will do it eventually.
Yeah.
But I say eventually, by then there'll be some other media type, and I'll have missed the boat. So it'd be like buying a better horse in 1930. The world's moved on.
Well, Hugo, you all do amazing work there, and congratulations for all the folks that you have helped. Like, last question here, in 2024, how many people will have used your site that actually then did the immigration into Canada and made their life easier because of it?
Hundreds of thousands over
Wow.
the time that we've been online. I mean, how long's a piece of string? How many people have been on the website?
It's hard to tell. Yeah.
Like, one of the primary drivers for us to become more of a product is to try and measure those exact things. If you're just a website and someone, look, there's this thing in Canada called express entry. I won't bore you with the details of how it works, but basically it's the main way to immigrate if you're a professional living around the world. We could have a blog on like how to create your profile for express entry, and someone could read that, do it, go off and do the thing. We've helped them do the thing, but it's hard to measure that. So we're trying to get those numbers tighter, but it's in the hundreds of thousands of the people who've used moving to Canada.com and ultimately moved here and established a life and career here. And many or even most cases, they're still here, because a lot of people who first move, like moving to the US, they'll first come on a temporary status. I mean, down there you got like your J1, H1B, O visa, all these things. Those are all temporary statuses. And then you got your green card, which is the sort of the holy grail for a lot of people. Beyond that, you've got citizenship, of course. Carrying people through a journey is that, yes, they might want to become a green card holder, but they'll often have to pass through this temporary status first. In Canada, it's not too dissimilar. So a lot of the people who have helped move here, we then help to try and stay here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other real nice thing that you guys do is help them identify what part of the country they might want to move to depending on their lifestyle and what they're looking for.
Yeah, and the brands we work with as well are very interested in that information as well. We were talking to one of the banks a couple of years ago before we were working with Scotiabank, and they're trying to go from like a branch heavy business model to like a digital first business model. So they actually aren't setting up any new branches west of Ontario. That's, in the western half of the country. And they're like, we're just not going to set up branches. Anyone who wants to work with us will have to just do everything digitally. While most people are digital first, some people do like having that fallback option of being able to go in and talk to someone. And it was definitely a demerit, other things being equal, in terms of that prospect versus others. So knowing where people are moving to helps us make stronger bets on which partner to partner with, among other data points. But that one in particular is very useful. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you're doing great work out there, Hugo. People want to learn more about you. It's certainly just moving2canada.com. Is there any other place that they should go to? Or that's just kind of the main place, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're all over YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We've got 2 people on the team who primarily or even exclusively just deliver content off the website, but on social media. When you're on moving2canada.com, look, you guys have an election down there. I don't know who's going to win or lose. I don't even...
I might be moving to Canada.
I don't know. Come on up. But look, if anyone's listening and is thinking of moving, create a free account. We've actually got this thing. Look, I imagine a huge amount of your listeners will be based in the US. We've got this thing called the US to Canada roadmap. You can create a Moving to Canada account. And you can sign up for this thing called the US to Canada roadmap. And it's an email series you get in your first week. I think it's 8 emails. And it basically carries you through crash course style the things you need to know about moving to Canada from the US. It's not just on immigration, it's also touches on employment and even dabbles in like culture, and tax, healthcare, that kind of thing. These are the primary concerns and major differences between the 2 countries. Yeah, so fill out a Moving to Canada profile, see it on the homepage, opt into for the US to Canada roadmap if indeed you're in or from the US. Then also brands, anyone wanted to reach out to us, there's a form at the bottom of the website called Become Our Partner. They can reach out. I'll be personally reviewing those. And we're always interested in talking to brands that want to tell their story to Canada's fastest growing marketing segment.
Yeah. Awesome. Hugo, thanks so much for taking the time to be here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks a ton for listening to and sharing this episode of The Business of Story. Hey, if I can help you and your team excel through the stories you tell, reach out to me at park@businessofstory.com. I've got in-person classes, virtual training, online courses, and a whole combination of those 3 so that we can meet your people where they're at and help them upskill their storytelling to make them the most confident, influential, and persuasive communicators/storytellers you'll ever see. So check it out. Give me a call. Shoot me a note. park@businessofstory.com. Big shout out to Caden Howell for editing our show, Marissa Hill for marketing, and Darius Holbert for our amazing custom theme music. Man, I hope you'll join us next Monday when Make-A-Wish Arizona's Executive Director, Fran Malice, will join us to share how building a strong nonprofit that delivers an incredible impact in the world all starts with defining and telling your story. Until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever define and tell is the story you tell yourself, so make that one a great one. Thanks so much for listening and have a terrific week.